All right. So in the first part of the test, I'm going to ask you a few questions on different topics. So let's talk about holidays. Do you prefer spending holidays with friends or with family, and why?
Hmm, it's a tough call because I do want to say my family, since I get on really well with my cousins. It's just that I have a different schedule than the rest of my family members. And by that I mean, I work as a freelance teacher, so my work schedule is kind of volatile, and I don't really have a summer vacation like the rest of the family. And that means that it's really hard for me to, match my timetable with them. As for my friends, I enjoy hanging out with them as well. It's just that they're also very busy, and sometimes like they're just as clueless as I am, which means that the task of making arrangements can be quite time consuming because we just argue every day.
Hmm. Okay. So what kind of holiday accommodation do you like to stay in, and why?
Mm, I'm thinking about a nice coastal resort because I like being close to the sea. I'm not quite sure why, to be honest, but whenever I go to the beach or areas with water, I just feel like I can recharge my batteries. As for the resort, I don't have any specific requirements outside of the fact that it should have a nice air conditioner so that you know so that the room is kept cool even on hot summer days.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about street markets. So are there many street markets in Vietnam?
I think that there are even in metropolitan centers like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. And it's mostly because of the fact that we're still very much in touch with our traditional culture. So street markets offer us a nice range of traditional products like clothes and food, which actually cost significantly less than whatever it is that you have to pay when you go to supermarkets. The thing here, though, is that you need to know how to negotiate because sellers in traditional markets tend to like ask for like a very high price.
Mhm. What do people usually buy at a street market?
I think that they can buy a lot of things. I mean, obviously, they can get traditional food there. Like for instance, when you go to a traditional market in Hanoi, chances are you'll be able to buy some traditional dishes like pho and bún riêu. And personally, I think what makes traditional markets a lot more exciting than restaurants is that the chefs there tend to be more creative. Like they always put their own spin on classic recipes. So, when you move from one store to another, you can always get something, new and exciting, despite the fact that essentially you're trying out the same dish. Another thing you can buy would be clothes, but you have to be very careful with regard to, the quality of the material. I mean, some stalls can can charge you a really high price for a fabric that is not that durable.
Mhm. Okay. So do you prefer to go shopping in a shopping mall or at the street market?
I think it depends. I mean, if I just want to, grab something quick, then I would go to the shopping mall. But not to all of the fancy stores there because I don't think that I can afford to make purchases there with my current pay grade. I'm just gonna go to like a convenience store that is located in a shopping mall. And I guess the best thing about convenience stores in these shopping malls is the fact that they tend to offer a wider variety of goods in comparison to independent convenience stores outside. But if I want to, unwind after a hard day at work, I would go to a digital market because, I guess, I guess these places are just more vibrant, and the comings and goings of people just make me feel, less stressed.
Hmm. Okay, so now in the next part, you can speak for between 1 and 2 minutes. So I'd like you to describe a car journey that you made that took longer than expected. So you can say where you were going, who you were with, how you felt during the journey, and explain why this car journey took longer than expected. So now I'm going to time you for 1 minute, and then you can start speaking from 1 to 2 minutes. All right, so you should start now.
Okay, so the car journey that I would like to talk about today happened a few years ago. So we went on this car trip to Sapa, which is a very lovely town in the north of Vietnam, for our summer vacation. And I handpicked this particular location because I thought that this would be a nice place for us to just let our hair down and relax after many months of hard work. And personally, I was under a lot of stress at the time because I was in charge of a huge project, and I was essentially working around the clock, which took a lot out of me. And so we went on this car trip to Sapa, and everything seemed to be going very well at the beginning. We were singing and chatting along the way. But then, out of nowhere, it started raining torrentially. And my friend who was driving at the time thought that, we would be able to, brave the elements, although we did have to, slow down a little bit just to be safe. So, he drove at a slightly slower speed, but then, the rain got really heavy. So he actually had to, seek shelter under a bridge. And the final nail in the coffin was the fact that not only did the rain last for 30 minutes, when we managed to drive for like 1 more kilometer, there was a huge tree in front of us because I think it had been struck by lightning. So the trip was delayed for like a few hours because it took a bit of time for the tree to be removed. But the silver lining here was that we managed to make a beeline to the town, and the traffic was great. I mean, there was not exactly a long queue of vehicles, and we got to the town at I think 7 in the evening, which was still early enough for us to grab some food. And I personally didn't feel any inconveniences while waiting for the tree to be removed so that we could resume our journey because we had the opportunity to talk more, which was nice.
Mhm. Okay, so now in the final part of the test, I'd like to discuss 1 or 2 general questions related to what you've been talking about. So first off, how interested are young people in your country in learning to drive?
Hmm. I guess you can say that mm, not all of us are that interested in learning how to drive. I mean, there are certainly lots of young kids who want to get a driver license so that they can drive cars to get to work or to take their families on trips. Some of my friends fall under that category, which means that they actually had to learn a lot to obtain their driver's licenses. But there are also other young people like me who don't really pay a whole lot of attention to this particular skill set because there are lots of other alternatives now. For those who don't know how to drive or are simply unwilling to do so, there are other motorbike apps that you can use to have someone drive you to work or to the location that you want to reach. SamSe, for instance, is a very prominent app now, and I think that it's a lot more convenient than like driving by yourself, especially when it's at the end of the day and you're kind of like running on empty, which means that it's hard for you to keep your eyes peeled.
Mhm. So what are the differences between driving in the countryside and driving in the city?
I think that there are a few distinctions here. At the forefront, I mean, obviously, when you drive in like a metropolitan center, you have to pay attention to speed limits because there are lots of like residential areas where there are lots of people, especially very young kids and older people who cross the road. So you can't really become careless and drive cavalierly. You have to pay attention to the speed and you have to make sure that you stop at red lights. In fact, for car drivers who violate traffic laws in Hanoi, they have to pay very heavy fines, and sometimes the fines can exceed the value of the car that they own, which means that it's a very heavy penalty. But when you drive in the countryside, I think that even though you still have to be aware of like how fast you're driving, you don't really have to pay attention to all the traffic lights because there aren't too many of them. And I think that police officers there also tend not to be as strict as those working in the city, mostly because of the fact that in the countryside, people don't really rush to get to anywhere. So, the possibility of accidents is already relatively low. And it's just that, everyone needs to pace themselves. And I feel like residents in the countryside tend to be better than their counterparts in the city in that particular regard.
Mhm. Okay, so that was it for the speaking test. Thank you very much.
Nice. I like to say something just so that I can put at the beginning of the video.
Mhm.
Do you know Starships by Nicki Minaj?
I do, yeah.
Right? Such an epic anthem. Starships were meant to fly. But let's not do this one more time, okay? That should be that should be for today.
Okay, all right.
Right. Bye bye.
Okay, goodbye.